Welcome to the Sports Investor Podcast, where it's all about smart sports betting. Here is your host, Professor MJ.
Hello guys, thanks for joining me for episode number 12 of the Sports Investor Podcast. Today will mark the second time that I'm having a guest on the show after interviewing, in episode number 8, Jason Logan from Covers.com, who unveiled some specific betting strategies related to the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NHL, and the NBA. If you have not listened to it, make sure you do, because he revealed some interesting tips. Today I'll be talking to Mathieu Jolivet from RDS.ca. He wrote a great article that previewed the 2017-2018 NBA season, and I figured I would ask him to come on the show since most of my listeners don't speak French and therefore would not be able to understand the content of the article. RDS is a sister network of TSN, which is the largest sports channel in Canada. Although we won't be talking specifically about sports betting, being able to gauge the relative strength of each team is critical to our success, which is why this session is relevant to all of us. So let's not wait any longer. Here's my interview with Mathieu Jolivet from RDS.ca, previewing the upcoming NBA season.
Hello,
Enjoy
NBA
it.
fans. Today I'm thrilled to have probably the biggest NBA expert in the media in the province of Quebec in Canada. His name is Mathieu Jolivet, and he works for the largest sports network here, RDS.ca. Hi, Mathieu. Thanks a lot for accepting the invitation. How are you doing?
I'm good, David. Thank you for inviting me. It's very nice of you.
Well, no problem. So now, Mathieu, correct me if I'm wrong, but along with your NBA articles, you also do NFL play-by-play. You call basketball games at the Olympics every 4 years, and you produce shows for RDS. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. I've been there for a little over 15 years now, so I do a lot of things, but NBA is on top of the list of my passions, I would say.
It's too bad that basketball is not that popular here, because it's a really fun sport.
Yeah, we're trying to develop it. Obviously, it's a hockey market in general, but I know there's a lot of basketball fans out there, so it's good to talk basketball as much as we can.
Well, great. So let's dive right in to preview the 2017-2018 NBA season. Instead of writing an article with the usual power rankings, Mathieu decided to analyze 10 specific teams that he's going to follow more closely for different reasons. That being said, please note those 10 teams will not necessarily be presented in order of how good they are. Let's start with number 10, the Denver Nuggets. Last year, they finished just one game back from the final and 8th seed in the Western Conference with a 40-42 record. But they finished fairly strong by going 26-19 towards the end of the season. They were plagued by many injuries that probably cost them a playoff spot. So, Mathieu, tell us why you are going to keep track of them and what to expect from them this year.
Yeah, I really like the Denver Nuggets. It's one of the younger teams that you'll find in the NBA with a lot of guys under 24 years old. It's one of the most dynamic athletic teams, and it's a team that we don't see that much on television, obviously being out west, not a lot of nationally televised games. But from what we've seen, from what we can read, from what we've heard, it's a team on the rise. I really like Nikola Jokic, their center, only 22 years old, one of the most talented centers in the NBA. In this day and age, as you know, David, you can't have your classic center back to the basket with the old post moves that can't really follow the pace, that can't really move the ball around. I'm thinking of Valanciunas in Toronto, for example, who's kind of getting passed by the 2017 type of game in the NBA. Jokic is a perfect center for the actual NBA. He's the best passer among the centers. He can score, he can rebound, he's really got flair. So it starts with him. I really like Gary Harris at the 2 spot. Jamal Murray, the Canadian, is kind of a combo guard. He's only 20 years old. He's had some up and downs in his rookie season, but he's really going to be a good player moving forward. They have role players that really can help in Wilson Chandler, Kenneth Faried. The way they finished last season, as you just mentioned, really gives me the feeling that they're going to finish above 500 this year, and they're going to be serious contenders for the 6th, 7th, or 8th playoff spot out west. So it's a team that you may not have seen a lot of, but that should grab your attention moving forward.
Great. So next up at number 9, we've got the Los Angeles Lakers. This franchise went through a great stretch where they finished with a record above 500 on 18 out of 19 seasons from 1994 until 2013. However, the team has now gone through 4 miserable seasons, compiling a 91 and 237 record over that time span. Mathieu, what is the outlook of this team for this season?
Well, David, you guessed that I didn't put them in the top 10 on my list because I think they'll be one of the 10 best teams. That's definitely not the case. I won't make too many hockey analogies, but I'll say this. You just mentioned how this team was basically one of the powerhouses of the league for 20 years. If you can go back even further to their glory days with Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, this has never been a franchise that's been willing to rebuild the way, for example, the Canadians refused to rebuild in the National Hockey League. They accepted to go through this process a few years ago, said, we're going to be really bad, we're sorry fans, but this is the way we have to do it to get good again. And now they're close to being good again. Obviously, the big name is Lonzo Ball. Everybody's talking about his arrival. He's got a lot of natural talent. He's got the charisma to go with Hollywood and that franchise. But he doesn't have the pieces around him yet to make the playoffs. I like Jordan Clarkson. I like Julius Randle. I think Brandon Ingram is his future sidekick and Ball I'm talking about in terms of what he can do. He's got that Kevin Durant type of natural length and ability. He's not at that level yet, but he can get there. And then you have a few, journeymen that have signed on 1-year big contracts, Brook Lopez and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Well, I call Caldwell-Pope. I call him a veteran, but he's only 24 years old. He's been in the league for a while. That being said, the Lakers I'm going to watch this year basically because I want to see how Ball finds his way in the NBA, how he can be a leader for that team, if he can score enough, because we know his outside shot is his biggest weakness. It's a very unorthodox release. But if he can find ways to score consistently as well as distribute like we know or we think we've seen him distribute, they can be really entertaining. And the big thing for them, the reason I'm watching them this year is that I'm interested to see how the youngsters will develop ahead of probably a huge free agent haul next summer. The word around the street, and this is not, I'm not, bringing up this wild rumor here saying that LeBron James is potentially very interested in joining them as a free agent this summer if he doesn't re-sign in Cleveland, which it doesn't look like he will. But the other big name that'll be a free agent that could go over there is Paul George. He's a local LA guy that has said publicly he wants to play for the Lakers one day. So if Magic Johnson is able to attract LeBron James and Paul George, adding them to Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, Julius Randle, and that young nucleus, I'm watching them for this year, but I'm also watching them for years ahead. I think Showtime could be returning to LA pretty shortly.
So free agent signings may be the biggest factor determining if they'll be playoff contenders within 2 or 3 years.
They're building on a few young, nice pieces, but I think the big leap forward can only take place if they're able to attract 2 big name free agents because they'll have tons of cap room at the end of this season. The reason they brought on Lopez and Caldwell-Pope on 1-year deals is they wanted to have every possible dollar to spend next summer. That's even why they gave away D'Angelo Russell to Brooklyn this past summer. Russell is talented, but they not only needed to make room for Ball at the point guard position, they needed to create additional cap space to get 2, maybe even 3 big names coming into LA. So I think they're set up to make a huge run. And if they do that and get those free agents, they're going to take a bigger leap forward than they ever would by building slowly through the draft.
Let's move on to number 8, the Minnesota Timberwolves. Personally, if you asked me to pick a team that I could watch every single game this season, I might go with them because of how exciting they figure to be. Tell us more about this team, and do they have a chance of reaching the playoffs after finishing 13th in the West last year?
Yeah, I think they do have a chance. It's been a while. They haven't been competitive since Kevin Love was there, and even when Love was there putting up huge numbers a few years ago, they weren't a playoff team. They were just a team that you respect and that they had this big forward that produced huge numbers, but you have to go back to the Kevin Garnett days for them to be this playoff team that was to be taken seriously. After years of being horrible and getting big draft picks, they're now on the verge. So they got a few years ago Andrew Wiggins from the Cavaliers for Kevin Love. So that was their first big piece. Then they obviously drafted Karl Anthony Towns, which was a great selection. He's only 21 yet now, but he's about to become one of the 10 or 12 best players in the NBA at the center position because of his versatility, because he can shoot from outside, because he has a great motor and he gives everything night in and night out. And now they just added 2 big pieces through trade and free agency this summer. Jimmy Butler coming over from Chicago was a great acquisition. They didn't give much to get him. He's a leader. He's not an old guy at 28. He's a great defensive player. He's going to bring some much needed toughness to this team. And then they added Jeff Teague as a point guard from Atlanta. I think Teague can really help stabilize that offense as well and surround Towns and Wiggins appropriately. So now you have this big core of 4 really good offensive players. I think it's enough for them to take the step forward. I love Tom Thibodeau, their coach. He's proven himself in Chicago. He needs, though, to implement his defensive style even more than he did last year, and that goes through Wiggins. I really think Andrew Wiggins, even though he now has a huge $148 million contract in the bank, needs to do a lot more to become an all-star player because athletically he has every tool. Now it seems to be a question of attitude. It seems to be a question of toughness and of wanting to do more than just score 30 points a night, to play defense, to rebound, to be an accountable player. If Thibodeau is able to get Wiggins to that next level, to go along with Towns and Butler and Teague, I really think their talent level from their core perspective is as good as any team or almost any team out west. So I'm really intrigued to see if they can take that next step forward. Obviously, the West is tougher than the East. To get a playoff spot is not easy. But even last year, the 7 or 8 teams making it in the playoffs in the West were around 500. So I think it's reasonable to think that Minnesota could be one of those teams this year.
Would you say they have more than 50% chance of reaching the playoffs?
Yeah, I would say a little more than 50. I'd say something around 60, 65% if I had to put a number on it. But you're the numbers guy, David. I'll let you deal with that.
Yeah, okay, great. At number 7, let's talk about the Philadelphia 76ers. They finished next to last in the Eastern Conference last year, but showed some good signs of improvement, especially when they went through an 11-5 stretch last January. Injuries have plagued this team and might have slowed the rebuilding process. Give us your impressions of this team, please.
Really intriguing team. It's a little bit in the same mold as the Timberwolves in the sense that they have great young talent that can match up with anyone. Now it's a question of, can it come together? Can it stay healthy? Because that's the biggest thing. They have a franchise center in Joel Embiid, who just signed the same huge contract extension that Wiggins signed in Minnesota. Embiid has talent. He's a unique player. He's got the charisma. He's got everything that they would want in Philly, but obviously it's health in his case. That's the issue. He has not played a full season so far, and if he can stay on the court for a decent amount of minutes for over 60, 70 games this year, I think they make the playoffs. They've drafted Markelle Fultz. They needed a guard, a scoring guard, a shooting guard to help them for a while. They have not drafted that player, even though they had a bunch of top 5 picks. They finally draft one after moving up the draft, trading with Boston. I like Fultz, but he's only 19. He's got some stuff to learn. Ben Simmons is their other rookie, drafted a year ago, missed his entire first season. foot issues. He's a 6'10" point guard, if you can believe it. He's not a good shooter, but he can create fantastic Australian talent. If he can stay healthy, that's another big if. They'll be great. They've got pieces with Okafor, with Stauskas, with Robert Covington, with players like that. And Dario Saric also I like. And they brought in a guy named J.J. Redick, who a lot of people know, 33-year-old shooting guard. Huge 1-year, $22 million deal, $23 million even. Now the question is, can he give that team a little bit like Butler is going to give Minnesota? Can Redick teach those guys how to work hard, how to be tougher, how to lead amongst themselves? I think he can. I like the guy. So if that acquisition helps solidify them, I think they can be a top 6 team or 7 team in the East. I think a 6 or 7 spot for that next step forward is a realistic target this year.
You know, these days I'm doing a roundup of NBA experts, asking them who's the most underrated team and who's the most overrated team in the NBA. Yeah. And the Sixers have been voted the most overrated team the most often so far. So that's pretty surprising, but we'll see.
Obviously, the opinion on them varies because a lot of people see their amount of talent and they think, well, they'll be a lot better this year, and others are like, well, that's all nice on paper, but if Embiid can't play more than 40 games, if Simmons gets injured again, there's a lot of ifs. I'm not hiding the fact that I'm a little audacious in my prediction with this team, but I think the potential is huge, and I'd like to believe that they'll be healthy enough after all these years, as you said, of being so unlucky injury-wise. If they stay healthy enough, I really am part of that the group of people that follow the NBA that think that they'll be good this year.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to follow them this year.
Yeah.
So, all right, at number 6, we've got the only Canadian team, the Toronto Raptors. Their regular season record improved on 5 consecutive seasons, but took a slight dip last year. Are they going to start regressing, or can they reach a higher ceiling?
Excellent question, David. I'm really split on the Raptors. Part of me is very appreciative and very impressed by their ownership group that is willing to spend the necessary amount of money with the exploding salaries of the past few years to keep the core together. They re-signed Kyle Lowry at basically $30 million a year for 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. They re-signed Serge Ibaka as a power forward that's 28, but that's been in the league for a while at over $20 million a year on average for a few years. They re-signed, obviously, DeMar DeRozan to a huge deal a year ago. So they're willing to spend. My problem with them is that I didn't see that much improvement last year. I saw DeRozan improve, but I didn't see the rest of the team necessarily take that step forward, considering that they went to the conference finals the year before. And I don't see an influx of young talent sufficient enough to convince me that they're going to be better this year than they were last year. Valanciunas, as I mentioned earlier during the show, is a player that's being passed by the current NBA as far as I'm concerned. He's not a good enough passer or shooter. He doesn't have the mobility. He can't really run the fast break. He's a classic guy that would have been really good 10, 15 years ago. That's not good enough anymore, but he's still being paid about $15, $16 million a year. So I don't see enough young talent to push them forward. OJ Anunoby is a rookie that a lot of people like for them, but I think he's more of a role player. So honestly, I don't know. I think they'll be in the playoffs. That's clear. But after that, can they really win a series or two in those Eastern Conference playoffs? It's not easy. Obviously, Boston took a huge blow last night with an injury that we'll get to in a few minutes. But even that being said, I think there are a few teams in the East that are ahead of the Raptors right now.
Okay. And we've got a high-octane offense at number 5 with the Houston Rockets, who won last night at the Warriors.
Yeah.
They finished 3rd in the West last season, 6 games back of the Spurs and 12 games back of the Warriors. Tell us about their new acquisitions, how they'll fit in, and how you feel the Rockets will do this year.
Well, obviously, my opinion changed a little bit last night because they decided to go to Golden State for the opening game of the season and beat the defending champions. I really did not see that coming, especially since they were down 13 after three quarters, and it looked like the Warriors were going to cruise. They have the talent level to compete with just about anybody. I don't think they have the talent level to beat the Warriors consistently, but they did last night, so they'll have to be taken seriously. James Harden is coming off a fantastic MVP season where he showed everything. He was deployed differently by Mike D'Antoni in terms of being, kind of a combo guard that handled the ball a lot, that became their point guard, but that still was their top scorer. So he came into his own, but they made an acquisition this summer to kind of change the chemistry and change the general philosophy of the offense. You wanted Harden to have the ball in his hands, but now you acquire one of the most ball-happy point guards in the league in Chris Paul. And he's going to need the ball in his hands as well. Paul actually didn't even finish the game yesterday because of certain medical issues. So I hope that doesn't linger throughout the season because Paul is 32 and he has a lot of miles on his body. Look, I think the idea by Daryl Morey, their GM, who's a very aggressive GM, was always looking to acquire star players. I think the idea of acquiring Paul was good because Paul is one of those top 20 talents that you don't find every day, and they gave up a bunch of spare parts to get him. But after that, how does it work? How does it really function for 82 games to have Paul and Harden sharing that ball, sharing that floor? They've said all the right things. They seem to really be good friends and have great chemistry. I'm still not convinced it's going to work. If it does, it's going to be interesting because they have, Ryan Anderson on the wing. They have Eric Gordon on the wing. They have a lot of volume scorers. They have PJ Tucker, who's going to be a useful acquisition acquired through free agency this summer. He finished last year in Toronto. So they have a lot of pieces. They have a great offensive philosophy. I'm not completely sold on them, but it's going to be one of the biggest, let's call it a chemistry experience in the NBA this year to follow at night in and night out.
Okay, we'll see if they can carry last night's success throughout the years. And up next at number 4 are the Boston Celtics. Much has been said about the Kyrie Irving, Isaiah Thomas trade. Do they have the pieces in place to go back to the NBA Finals for the first time since 2010?
Well, obviously the narrative surrounding the Celtics changed dramatically last night.
Yeah.
Gordon Hayward, 5 minutes and change into his first game in Celtics green, suffered a gruesome injury, a dislocated ankle, a fractured tibia. It's possible he can miss the entire season or at least most of it. That was really awful to see. It changes completely the outlook on them. I guess Las Vegas adjusted the win total for this season because the projected win total for them, obviously, if you go by the first number that was out there before Hayward getting injured, then you would want to put a few bucks under.
Yeah, for sure.
It's going to be adjusted now, so I don't know what the new number is going to be. I still believe this team is a playoff team even without Hayward. Obviously, Kyrie Irving is the man now. He's going to have that burden on his shoulders, but I think he's ready for it. He's going to be their go-to scorer, and I think I don't see a problem there. I love Brad Stevens, their coach. I think he's going to put in place an offensive system that's going to be really motivating and solid for the players. Al Horford's now going to have to score a little more, and you're going to rely on 2 really young guys now that you didn't quite rely on as much before the Gordon Hayward injury. The first guy is Jaylen Brown, 20 years old, second year, a top 3 pick a year ago. Looked more like a defensive specialist last year, a guy that had an inconsistent offensive game. But last night, he was the guy that took the most shots for the Celtics, had a solid game. They're going to need him now offensively now that Hayward is injured. And the other guy that played well yesterday as a starter that I really like is a rookie, Jason Tatum. He's also, at 19 years old, only going to have to pick up a lot of the slack through the Hayward injury. He's got huge talent. A lot of people in Boston want to compare him to Paul Pierce with his offensive ability, young Paul Pierce, obviously. So if Tatum and Brown can come of age a little earlier than expected, they'll compensate sufficiently for Hayward's loss that they'll finish in the top 6, I think. But the potential to knock off the Cavs and to win the East, I think, just went out the window with the Hayward injury. It's sad but true. Only 5 minutes into his first season. It's tough to be a Celtics fan this morning.
So you see them finishing maybe 4th or 5th in the Eastern Conference?
Yeah, top 6. I think they can squeak into the 4 spot even without him. It's just that they're relying on younger guys now. But I think a top 6 finish is still very feasible despite the injury.
Let's now discuss the Oklahoma City Thunder at number 3. Most of the talk revolving around this team last year concerned the great achievements by Russell Westbrook. After finishing in 6th place in the Western Conference last year, what's their outlook for the upcoming season?
Fascinating team for this summer. As you said, last year everything was focused around Westbrook. What he was doing, averaging a triple-double, was absolutely crazy. No one had ever seen that. No one could have envisioned that. He decided that he was going to put the team on his shoulders after Kevin Durant left for Golden State. I really respected what he did, but the other narrative surrounding that team was that he was alone. There was no other consistent scorer around him. So it was basically, well, let him score his 40, but we'll still stop the other guys and we'll win, which happened. Well, obviously he took them to the playoffs and really overachieved with a bunch of guys around him that weren't good enough to support him. That being said, I did not believe that the small market Thunder had the necessary tools to attract big names this summer, and they made 2 fantastic deals. Getting Paul George from Indiana. I know George is about to be a free agent, but still, they gave up Victor Oladipo on an $18 million a year contract. He was way overpaid. And Domantas Sabonis, a Lithuanian center who fans in Oklahoma City, they didn't dislike him, but they would have preferred that he had his father's natural talent, Arvydas Sabonis from years past when he played in Portland. So they gave up 2 spare parts to get an all-star caliber player. I was really impressed by that move. Now they've started to court him to try to convince him to stay long-term. And after that, at the end of the summer, some team finally convinced the Knicks to give away Carmelo Anthony instead of just having him rot away in New York with a bad team around him. I didn't think Oklahoma City could do it, though. They gave up a bunch of spare parts again to make it happen. So now they have these 3 great offensive talents and especially 2 good players to score the ball and to take that pressure off of Westbrook. So I really like this team because they also have some good role players that understand and accept their role. Steven Adams at the center position, not a scorer, but a bruiser, a leader, a tough guy. A guy like Andre Roberson on the wing is also really good. He can't shoot a lick, but he can really play defense. And they have a few other spare parts there. And so I like this team. I don't know how the chemistry will go. I think it has to happen quickly, but I see them finishing top 4 in the West. Top 4, maybe 5th at worst in the Western Conference this year.
Okay, the next to last team to keep an eye on is last year's runner-up, the Cleveland Cavaliers. They've reached the finals on 3 straight occasions, winning 1 of them. Do you believe they will make it that far a 4th consecutive time or not? And why?
Look, with the Gordon Hayward injury yesterday, I think it opens up the door for them even more to make it back there. I think it's still tough on the Celtics to think that knocking them off this year is feasible. I have a few concerns with this team. My first concern is that LeBron James is a free agent at the end of the season, and a lot of people expect him to leave Cleveland and break their hearts for a second time. It won't hurt as much as the first time since he brought them a championship this time around, the second go around. But if he leaves, obviously it changes everything. I hope he doesn't check out before the end of the season. The first time he left Cleveland, the playoffs he had just before leaving weren't his best. Mentally, some people think he had checked out. I hope he plays hard and completely dedicated to his very last minute on the court for them. Because if he does, simply because he's LeBron, because he's this superhuman that has more than 1,300 games in the experience and is still going strong, I think they're the team to beat in the East still. The other main concern is Isaiah Thomas's injury. It was a significant hip injury that forced him out of the playoffs at the end of last season. And it's not the type of injury you need a month or 2 to get back from. It may take the entire season for him to slowly get back into it. We don't even know when he's going to get his feet back on the court for the first time. So that is going to be the key. If he can come back and gradually become the type of player he was in Boston before the end of the season, they're going to be really good and really tough to deal with because he can volume score next to LeBron. Then you can bring back Kevin Love at that third scoring option and not the second, because I don't think he's a second scorer anymore. And you have, these Jay Crowder types and Tristan Thompsons and J.R. Smith and Kyle Korver. You have a bunch of really good surrounding players. So they're still the team to beat. I just don't love the fact that LeBron is not dedicated long term and that Isaiah Thomas is still injured. But the East is the East and LeBron is LeBron.
Well, I've read on rotoworld.com that Isaiah Thomas is targeting a January return, but we'll see if that really happens.
If that happens, it's not too bad. But he put his body on the line for Boston last year. He paid the price for them. He said he should have stopped earlier in the playoffs because he aggravated the injury by keep going forward. And how does he get thanked by them? He gets traded this offseason.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty crazy situation. We all love Thomas. He's a great scorer. He's as tough a guy as there is in the league. So if he comes back in January and is close to his old self, the Cavs will be really good.
Well, of course, we kept the reigning champions for last, the Golden State Warriors. Is there any chance they don't win the big trophy?
Well, after last night, I kind of have a slight doubt all of a sudden. I didn't expect them to lose their first game. I think it's only a bump in the road. I think they're the clear favorites. Vegas will reflect that ranking, I think, in those betting odds. Honestly, I think they'll be better than last year. And last year they won. So imagine. I mean, Kevin Durant had a year to acclimate to his new surroundings, to develop chemistry with Curry, Thompson, and Green. He did that pretty quickly. He was the best player on the court during the NBA Finals, and that includes LeBron. He is just at the peak of his powers right now. Steph Curry is now a 5-year huge deal in the bank, which means that he'll be freed up to just be himself and be that scorer that we know he can be. He's at the peak of his career also. All those guys are still below 30 years old, if you can believe it. Klay Thompson and Draymond Green, that hasn't changed. They added a few nice pieces this summer. Nick Young, we saw last night, can be a good scorer off the bench if need be. Jordan Bell is a rookie that's going to do a lot of nice things for them out of Oregon. So, there's no reason to think they're not going to win again. The only reason it would be that Durant or Curry would get injured at some point in the season for a significant amount of time. But as long as those four guys just stay on the court, stay healthy, stay happy, and move towards the playoffs, on all being healthy, they're the team to beat for sure. It's kind of disappointing in the sense that you would like for the season to start and for the opportunity that 5 or 6 different teams really have a shot at winning. We haven't had that for 2 or 3 years now, but who doesn't like to watch a super team play? So these guys are fun to watch. So it's the Warriors trophy until something happens that makes them lose it.
As a statistician, I must remind you that a one-game sample is not enough to draw any conclusions about the upcoming season.
That's good of you to remind me. And it's basically saying, they can lose a game or two here and there, but obviously it doesn't change much the big picture.
Yeah, so you believe the Warriors are highly likely to win the championship. So if they don't win it, who are the 2 or 3 most likely teams to become the new champions?
I thought about it, and I don't see a huge team coming out of nowhere. So the 3 teams I think have the talent and the potential to do it are Houston, Oklahoma City, and Cleveland. Cleveland is if Thomas comes back healthy and LeBron is completely dedicated. Oklahoma City, obviously, their big 3 offensively can give Golden State fits, and they have a few defensive pieces too. So that in terms of depth and of coming together, that's the question. And Houston has the volume scoring also. So those are the 3 teams I see. I think the over-under for amount of wins for the season that I saw posted the past few days is pretty good. I don't see a team that's going to blow away their number. But those are the 3 teams that I think have the potential.
Well, thanks a lot, Mathieu. I appreciate you taking the time to speak to us about what should be another exciting basketball season. It was great talking to you.
It was my pleasure, David.
Well, for those of us who speak French, we'll definitely be reading you on RDS.ca. or listening to you on television. Thanks again for everything you do, and we'll stay in touch.
My pleasure, for sure.
Okay guys, I hope this discussion with Mathieu Jolivet helped you get a better grasp of what to expect during the 2017-2018 NBA season. If you would like to receive my free NBA, NFL, NHL picks, or my informative articles related to sports betting directly in your mailbox, just sign up to my mailing list from the homepage of my website at professormj.com. Alternatively, you could join my Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/ProfessorMJ. Come join my fun community of sports investors. We have more than 500 members coming from many countries around the globe. Thank you very much for spending some time with me today. I wish you all the best with your sports investments. See you next time.